When we look at a painting like number 1A, 1948, we know right away that it is paint on canvas. We can see handprints in places and arcing lines formed by liquid paint flung from above the surface of the canvas. The fact that we can tell right away that these paintings are paint on canvas is an example of medium specificity. This was an idea championed by the influential art critic Clement Greenberg. For Greenberg, as the textbook points out, the history of modern art was about truth to materials, especially paint being paint, not an attempt to turn the surface into a window like David did in his neoclassical history painting, The Oath of the Horatii. In Pollock, the medium, in this case paint, is being used in a way that highlights what it is, liquid pigment. It's not pretending to be anything else. The canvas isn't a window, it's a surface for that paint. Pollock's technique of laying the canvas flat and applying the liquid paint on top of it further emphasizes this specificity. This very flatness of the canvas and specificity of the medium was one of the things that led Greenberg to celebrate Pollock's work and to call him the greatest painter this country had produced. He also celebrated Helen Frankenthaler, whose works, like The Bay, were created by pouring thinned paint onto raw canvas, allowing it to pool and absorb in ways that again emphasized the materials themselves, as well as the formal qualities of shape and color. In Greenbergian formalism, it's all about what can be observed in the artwork itself. Another critic, named Harold Rosenberg, came at the abstract expressionists from a different direction. For him, it wasn't so much about medium specificity, but about the artist's gesture. He was the one who came up with the phrase action painting to describe the gestural abstractionists. He wrote, "The big moment came when it was decided to paint, just to paint. The gesture on the canvas was a gesture of liberation from value, political, aesthetic, moral." He is shown here in a painting by Elaine de Kooning, who was married to Willem de Kooning and an artist in her own right. In this painting, we do see that gesture. We can almost feel the movement of her hand across the canvas. We certainly feel the paintness of the paint dripping freely down the canvas. But her exuberant brushstrokes are not just about the qualities or texture of the paint, but about her own movement. For Rosenberg, the genius of the abstract expressionists was in turning the painting into a record of a performance, not just an aesthetic object, but a trace of the artist's own presence and movement. Another artist, married to a male artist who somewhat overshadowed her, was Lee Krasner. Krasner trained at several New York art schools before joining the mural division of the Works Progress Administration, a government program that hired artists and put them to work. She and Pollock began to share a studio in 1942 and were married in 1945. It was she who helped him understand and refine his art and to give him the confidence in his new and rather shocking style. She herself was a very accomplished painter. In her Untitled from 1949, we see a densely covered surface of almost letter-like forms arranged on almost a grid that might remind us of Mondrian. Her Polar Stampede from 1960 has that gestural abstractionist freedom of movement and trace of the artist. If we look closer at this very large painting, we can see wonderfully textural details of sprayed, dripped, and spattered paint. Both Pollock's drip paintings and Krasner's Polar Stampede feature an all-over composition where the entire canvas is equally covered without a single focal point. The entire canvas becomes an exuberant record of the artist's movements and gestures. Other abstract expressionists, however, like Franz Kline, did have recognizable compositions. Kline painted primarily in black and white, and his paintings tend to look almost calligraphic, like bulky letter forms against white paper. Here, Kline's thick, painterly black lines balance the negative space of the white background, giving a sense of movement, but not of chaos. As I mentioned before, abstract expressionism is often divided into two branches. On the one side is gestural abstraction, or action painting, which includes artists like Pollock, both de Kooning's, Krasner, and Kline. On the other side is chromatic abstraction, in which emotional resonance comes not from the trace of the artist's hand or movement, but from the colors they selected. Barnett Newman, whose One-Ment One we looked at earlier, is a chromatic abstractionist. These artists are also sometimes called color field painters, and Newman's Vir Eroicus Sublimis, Sublime Heroic Man, is a vast field of almost unbroken color, in this case a vibrant red. Here is a photograph of the painting hanging at the Museum of Modern Art, where you can tell just how large it is. We again see Newman's trademark zips, although this time they have clean, precise edges and are arranged across the length of the canvas. In the middle is a perfect square, delineated on the left by a white line and the right by a slate blue one. Jonathan Feinberg writes that the middle square emphasizes the perfection of the center, and that the color field evokes the universe, the infinite, and completely lacks any texture or sense of human intervention, end quote. Again, Newman was interested in the sublime and communicated it and humans' relationship to it through ordering the visual world in a way that emphasizes the viewer's presence. Mark Rothko was another of the chromatic abstractionists and an immigrant. He was born in Russia. His canvases are much more painterly than Newman's. We can see that factor or touch of the artist's hand that artists like Mondrian strove to erase. This links him to Franz Kline, whose painting we see at the right in this installation view at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. To the left is Robert Motherwell's Elegy to the Spanish Republic, number 57, 1957 to 1961. Rothko's is clearly the most colorful of these three paintings, with a flame-colored orange square dominating a warm brown canvas above a more subtle indigo rectangle. Both rectangles have soft edges that on close inspection reveal meticulous paint application. The orange seems to glow with its own luminosity, and its soft edges, when viewed in person, seem almost to pulsate against the background. This is a very difficult effect to photograph, so I hope that you have the chance to stand in front of a Rothko yourself someday and experience it for yourself. The experience Rothko desired for his viewers was an emotional one. He wrote, "The people who weep before my pictures are having the same religious experience I had when I painted them." Take a moment to look carefully at a Rothko painting. This or another one you find at a museum online. In your journal, describe what you see and your sensation of looking. What do you notice, and what do you think about what Rothko was trying to do, especially in light of his earlier quote?